You have no house, no heater, no electricity, no warm bed, no winter coat, no supermarket, no car, no medicine, no hot shower. There is only icy wind, bare ground, hunger, darkness, and a winter that can kill you while you sleep. Could you survive? Does that make you feel uneasy? For ancient people, this was normal. This was everyday life. Thousands of years ago, winter was not just an unpleasant season. It was an enemy. It came for a long time. It took away food. It froze water. It drove animals away. It turned the land into an empty, cold field. And if we are honest, humans should not have survived in such conditions at all. A mammoth had thick fur and a heavy layer of fat. A bear had a den and the ability to wait out the cold. Northern animals had hooves, fur, strength, and bodies used to frost. But what did humans have? Thin skin, almost no fur, weak teeth, slow legs, a body much better suited for warmth than for icy wind. If an ordinary person were left outside in winter without clothes, fire, or shelter, they would die very quickly. Not in a week, not in a month, sometimes in just a few hours. And yet our ancestors survived. They lived through cold that we can barely imagine today. They lived in a world where ice covered huge lands, where trees were almost impossible to find, where food disappeared for months, and where the wind could be so strong it felt like nature itself was trying to erase humans from the earth. But they did not disappear. They reached spring, then another spring, then another. And at the end of that long chain, you appeared. That means every one of your ancestors once won a war against winter. And if even one of them had lost, you simply would not exist. So how did they do it? How did a weak, almost naked creature survive in places where even strong animals died from cold and hunger? The answer was not one magic trick. One thing did not save them. They were saved by a whole set of solutions: fire, clothing, shelters, food, the group, memory, and most importantly, the ability to prepare in advance. Because ancient humans could not afford to be surprised by winter. A modern person can say, "Oh, it suddenly got cold." An ancient person who said that usually did not live until spring. The first and most important weapon against winter was fire. Without fire, almost nothing else mattered. Fire gave warmth. Fire gave light. Fire made it possible to cook meat. Fire helped dry animal skins. Fire scared away animals. Fire turned a dark, icy night into a place where life was still possible. But ancient people did not simply sit beside a random campfire. They learned how to use fire wisely. They had to find fuel. They had to keep the flame alive. They had to protect the fire from wind and snow. They had to make it burn for a long time without burning everything around them. In open, cold places, wood was often hard to find. So people used whatever they had nearby. They could burn bones, fat, dry grass, anything that produced heat. It sounds rough, but for them, fire was not comfort. It was life. As long as the fire burned, a person could breathe a little easier, but the moment they stepped away from it, winter immediately reminded them who was really in charge. So the next step was clothing, and it was one of the most important inventions in history. At first, it was simple. A person killed an animal, removed its skin, and threw it over their shoulders. That already helped. A hide protected against wind, held in some warmth, and covered the body. But a simple hide was not true winter clothing. It slipped off. Wind blew under it. Heat escaped through every gap. If you moved, it got in the way. If you sat down, your back opened up. If you raised your arms, the cold slipped inside. For a mild autumn, maybe that would have been enough. For Ice Age cold, it was not. The real change began when people learned to sew. It sounds too simple, but a small bone needle may have been more important than a giant spear. With a needle, people could connect pieces of hide, make sleeves, close the wrists, make shoes, make clothes that fit the body, wear several layers, seal the gaps where warmth escaped. The difference between a hide on your shoulders and real warm clothing is enormous. It is like the difference between a piece of cloth and a winter jacket. Clothing allowed humans to carry warmth with them. They were no longer completely tied to the fire. They could walk, hunt, search for food, carry things, and still stay alive. People used different kinds of skins. Thick hides protected against wind. Softer hides worked as an inner layer. Fur could be worn outside or inside, depending on the need. They made shoes from leather, mittens from fur, thread from animal tendons. In deep cold, exposed parts of the body were dangerous. The face, neck, and hands lost warmth very quickly, so people could rub animal fat onto their skin. It was unpleasant, but it worked. Fat protected the skin from wind and cold, like a rough ancient cream. There was another problem we rarely think about. Snow can blind you. When everything around you is white, sunlight reflects off the snow so strongly that your eyes start to hurt, and a person can temporarily lose their sight. For a hunter, that is deadly. If you cannot see, you are not the hunter. You are the prey. So northern people invented a simple protection: narrow slits cut into bone or wood and worn over the eyes. Through small openings, less light entered the eyes, and the glare hurt much less. In a way, these were ancient snow glasses. Little by little, humans built themselves a new body. They had no fur, so they made clothing. They had no claws, so they made tools. They had no thick hide, so they took hides from animals. They had no natural protection from winter, so they built it themselves. But clothing did not solve everything. At night, you needed a home. And this is where we often imagine ancient people as too primitive, as if they simply hid in caves and waited for warmth to return. Sometimes they did. A cave really could be a good shelter. There was less wind inside. The entrance could be defended. Stone walls held in some heat, but caves were not everywhere. In some places where people lived, there were no good caves, no forests, and no easy building materials, only cold open land and giant animals all around. So people began to build shelters from what the frozen land gave them. For example, from mammoth bones. Imagine a house built from the remains of giants. Huge bones buried in the ground. Curved tusks used as supports. Ribs forming the frame. Everything covered with hides, moss, earth, and snow. Inside, a fire burns. Outside, the wind howls. And inside sits a family that is not just surviving, but living. This was not a random pile of bones, it was construction. People had a plan. They understood how to make a foundation, how to close gaps, how to hold in warmth, how to make an entrance, and how to use the ground as protection. They could dig the shelter slightly into the earth, because below the surface it was warmer than in the open wind. They could make the entrance lower than the sleeping area. Cold air is heavier than warm air, so it sank down and stayed near the entrance, while the warmth stayed higher, near the people. They did not know the modern words for this, but they saw that it worked. They used snow as protection. That seems strange because snow is cold, but a thick layer of snow can hold in warmth. Inside a snow-covered shelter, it can be much calmer than outside in the wind.
Now's the time to subscribe to the channel.
Snow worked like a blanket for the home. They sealed gaps with moss, mud, grass, hides, and resin. Anything that stopped the wind from getting inside was valuable. The main goal was simple: stop the wind and keep the warmth. Because frost itself is dangerous, but wind makes it much worse. It pulls warmth from the skin, blows warm air out of clothing, and slips into every crack. If you stand in an open field in winter, you lose strength quickly. If you hide behind a stone, trees, or a wall, you have a chance. That is why ancient people chose their winter camps very carefully. They could not simply stop wherever they liked. They had to think: is there fuel nearby? Is there water? Are there animals? Is there protection from the wind? Can danger be seen coming? Can we survive here for several months? Winter punished bad choices, but even if you have fire, clothing, and shelter, winter still has one slow killer left: hunger. In summer and autumn, you can find berries, roots, plants, eggs, and small animals. You can hunt more often. The land gives more. But in winter, everything changes. Plants almost disappear. Many animals leave. Others hide. Snow covers signs of food. Every hunt takes a lot of strength, and strength is exactly what starts to run out. If ancient people began thinking about food only when snow arrived, it was already too late. They had to prepare in advance. When they managed to kill a large animal, it was not just dinner. It was a chance to survive for weeks or months. They ate meat, but not all of it at once. They dried it, smoked it, froze it, hid it in pits, stored it in cold places. Sometimes the cold itself became their helper. Frost worked like a natural refrigerator. People could use holes in the ground, shade, snow, ice, and cold water. Anything that helped keep meat longer mattered. They wasted almost nothing. Meat was food. Fat was warmth, fuel, skin protection, and important calories. Bones became tools, needles, shelter frames, and fuel. Hide became clothing and covering for the home. Tendons became thread. Horns and tusks became weapons and building parts. An animal did not give just one thing. It gave a whole survival system. That is why hunting was not simply looking for food. It was work for the whole group. One person would struggle to deal with a large animal, but a group could drive a herd, surround prey, use fire, shouts, stones, and the shape of the land. People remembered the places where animals passed every year. They knew the trails. They knew where a herd could be pushed toward a cliff, a swamp, a narrow passage, or a stone wall. They were not stronger than a mammoth or a bison, but they were more patient and smarter. The most important thing is this: ancient people did not live only for today. They thought about winter before it came. In summer, it was not enough to eat. You had to save. In autumn, it was not enough to hunt. You had to prepare supplies: a good hide, dried meat, sharp tools, a strong shelter, a protected fire. All of this was the difference between life and death. We often live as if tomorrow will solve itself. Ancient humans did not have that luxury. If they were not prepared, winter did not forgive them. But there was one more thing, without which everything else might not have worked. People survived together. In winter, being alone was dangerous. One person could freeze, one person could get sick, one person might not return from a hunt, one person could not sleep, guard the fire, repair clothing, watch children, and search for food all at the same time. The group solved these problems. Someone watched the fire, someone repaired clothing, someone prepared hides, someone searched for fuel, someone hunted, someone cared for children, someone remembered where animals had been found before. Someone knew which plants could be used. Someone was strong. Someone was watchful. Someone was experienced. Winter showed that humans are not solitary animals. Humans are group creatures. In a tight shelter, people shared not only food, but also heat. The more people were close together, the warmer it became inside. Bodies themselves became a source of warmth. Children could sleep closer to the center. The old and weak received protection. Adults covered the edges. It was not very comfortable, but it saved lives. Today, people dream of having their own room. Back then, a private room could mean death from cold. Of course, life was not a beautiful story about a happy family sitting around a fire. Winter could make people cruel. When food became too scarce, conflicts began. Groups could fight over hunting places, supplies, and shelters. Sometimes humans became dangerous to other humans. In the worst times, a person could do things that seem unthinkable today. If hunger became too strong, if there was no choice left, ancient people sometimes did terrible things simply to survive. Winter tested more than the body. It tested morality. It tested the bond inside the group. It tested who would share food and who would hide it, who would help the weak and who would abandon them, who would endure fear and who would break. But that is why the groups that survived became stronger. They learned, they remembered, they passed down to their children not just stories, but rules for life. Do not go far alone. Do not waste fat. Do not let the fire go out. Do not throw away bones. Do not delay repairing clothing. Do not laugh at the cold. Prepare for winter while it is still warm. Sometimes people even used animals that lived near them for warmth. In later times, when humans already had domestic animals, they could keep livestock close to the home or even under the same roof. Animals gave off heat, and that helped warm the house. The smell, dirt, and cramped space were unpleasant. But when the choice is between a bad smell and freezing to death, the choice becomes simple. Some peoples adapted to cold so strongly that their way of life seems almost impossible. They could live in icy places with very little clothing, use special resting positions, save body heat, keep moving, make small fires, and know dozens of ways not to lose warmth. Humans did not become bears or mammoths, but they learned to get the most out of their bodies and the world around them. There is even a strange idea that scientists still debate. It is possible that some ancient people, during extremely harsh winters, could slow down their lives almost into a deep sleep. Not like a bear in a den, and we cannot say for sure that it is true. But some discoveries make researchers discuss this possibility. Maybe during the coldest and hungriest months, people moved less, ate less, lay in shelters more, and tried to wait out the worst of it. Not a magical true hibernation, but an extreme way to save energy. Even if this idea is still debated, it shows the main point. Winter was such a terrifying enemy that humans looked for any possible way to stay alive. And here is what matters most. Ancient people did not defeat winter with strength. They were not stronger than the cold. They were not faster than the wind. They could not order the snow to melt. They could not press a button and warm their home. They won in another way. They learned to think ahead. They took fire and made it the center of life. They took animal hide and turned it into clothing. They took mammoth bones and built a home. They took snow, earth, moss, and resin and made protection. They took meat and learned how to store it. They took fear and turned it into rules. They took the weak human body and surrounded it with intelligence, hands, and other people. That is why we survived. Not because humans were the strongest animals. They were not. Not because humans were made for ice. They were not. But because humans could look at a problem and ask, how do we get around this? Cold kills, then we need fire. Wind steals warmth, then we need walls and clothing. Food disappears in winter, then we must store it in advance. One person is weak, then we must stay together. And each answer gave one more day, one more night, one more spring. Today, we have almost forgotten how terrifying winter once was. We complain when the car is cold. We get annoyed when the house feels chilly. We wait for food delivery while snow falls outside. For us, cold has often become an inconvenience. For them, it was a war. And they won that war. Every time you put on a warm jacket, enter a heated home, or eat hot food in winter, you are using a victory that began a very long time ago, with a small fire, with the first sewn hide, with the first shelter against the wind, with the first piece of meat saved for later. Your ancestors survived winters in which humans should not have survived. They did not have technology in our sense of the word, but they had something just as powerful. They knew how to notice, remember, share, build, endure, and prepare. If one day in winter you feel cold, even inside a warm room, just remember this. Once, your ancestors sat beside a weak fire in the middle of an icy night, heard howling in the darkness, and still believed they would live until morning. And they did. That is why you are here now.
If you will watch it this far, please give it a like.